At my daughter's wedding, her fiancé pulled out a chair as I was sitting down, and I fell hard against the polished floor amid the stunned silence of the guests. "Your place is on the floor," he said mockingly, the corners of his mouth curling upward with deliberate cruelty. Laughter rippled in pockets of the crowd, though most faces froze in shock. My cheeks burned, but before I could gather myself, an older man at the far table rose abruptly. His eyes locked on mine, widening as though he'd seen a ghost. "Sir," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Is that really you?" That moment changed everything. The night air was brittle when the brakes screeched outside my garage 3 months earlier. Tires hissed against asphalt, headlights slicing across the siding of my small Houston home. A car door slammed hard enough to rattle the tools hanging on my pegboard. "Dad, you won't believe this!" My daughter, Eliza, burst through the side door, cheeks flushed, excitement radiating from her like she was 12 again, running home with news of a first school play. I dropped the wrench I'd been using, oil spattering across the concrete. The half-rebuilt 1969 Chevy truck in front of me sat exposed, its engine parts scattered like puzzle pieces waiting for the right hands. I wiped my palms on the rag tucked into my belt, squinting against the sharp fluorescent glare. "What's got you so worked up, kiddo?" I asked, stretching my back. Her eyes shone brighter than the ring glittering on her finger. She thrust her phone at me, bouncing on her toes like she might take off. "Look, Dad! He proposed! Adrian proposed!" On the tiny screen, I saw a restaurant I could never afford, white linen tables under chandeliers that looked like dripping crystal, waiters gliding like dancers in starched uniforms. Adrian knelt with perfect form, his navy suit crisp, a Rolex peeking from his cuff as he opened a velvet box. Gasps rose from the surrounding tables, and Eliza's radiant yes rang over the applause. My throat tightened. I forced a smile, careful not to let my unease show. "When's the big day?" "June," she said breathlessly. "Just 3 months away. Isn't that amazing? Adrian says long engagements are unnecessary when you already know." "June?" I muttered, reaching for the rag again just to keep my hands busy. "That's not far at all." She spun, arms out like she was embracing the entire night sky. "He's perfect, Dad. You'll see. Tomorrow he wants to take you to dinner so you two can finally meet properly." Her perfume lingered as she kissed my cheek before rushing inside. The garage door clicked shut, leaving me alone with my scattered tools, the quiet hum of the street, and the heavy question pressing on my chest: who exactly was Adrian Clay? Hours later, the question still gnawed at me. I sat hunched over the glowing screen of my aging desktop, the frame holding a photo of my late wife, Marisol, watching over me. Her eyes in that picture mirrored Eliza's, the same wide, unguarded trust. I touched the wedding band hanging from the chain under my shirt. "Help me keep her safe," I whispered. It didn't take long to find Adrian's profile. Financial consultant. Clay and Porter Associates. His profile picture showed him leaning against a sleek Maserati, sunglasses reflecting the flash. Post after post scrolled by, each one more arrogant than the last. Moving up in the world. Some people settle for ordinary. Not me. Dinner bills bigger than most people's rent. That's what success looks like. And then, buried in the comments of a congratulatory post, his words froze me. "She's perfect. Sweet. Trusting. And her old man? Just a simple mechanic. Won't be a problem." My fists clenched. My jaw ached from grinding my teeth. He wasn't just ambitious, he was dismissive, condescending, dangerous in ways Eliza's heart couldn't yet see. The next evening, I tugged at the lapels of my only good suit, the one I'd worn to Eliza's college graduation. Its navy fabric was clean but worn, the pocket mended from an old tear. I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror, gray spreading through my hair, calluses etched into my hands, 59 years etched into lines across my face. I wasn't a man of luxury. I was a man of work, of scraped knuckles and late nights keeping a roof over our heads after Marisol's passing. The thought of standing across from the man who saw all of that as weakness churned my stomach. The restaurant Adrian chose, The Glass Garden, in downtown Houston, was the kind of place where each appetizer cost more than a week's groceries. Inside, chandeliers glowed like amber fire above marble floors, every table whispering of wealth. Mr. Vega. Adrian rose just late enough to signal reluctance when I approached their table. His handshake was limp, dismissive, his smile all sharp edges. "Congratulations," I said, forcing my voice steady. "You and my daughter must be very happy." "We are," he replied smoothly. "And we'll be even happier once everything's in place. You'll see." The sommelier arrived, and Adrian ordered a bottle of Bordeaux without glancing at the price or asking if either of us wanted wine. He swirled it with practiced arrogance, nodding as if doing the waiter a favor. As the evening wound on, he jabbed with subtle insults dressed as observations. My work as a mechanic became refreshingly quaint. Our neighborhood was authentically working class. Each word landed like a pinprick designed to bleed me slowly, all while Eliza smiled nervously, trying to keep the peace. Finally, the bill arrived, nearly $400. Adrian slid it toward me with deliberate slowness, his smirk daring me to refuse. "Tradition dictates the bride's father handles dinner, doesn't it, Mr. Vega?" Eliza's face flushed. "Adrian, please." I set my card down, my hands trembling just slightly. "It's fine, Princess." Adrian leaned back in satisfaction. "Excellent. I do appreciate a man who understands proper protocol." As the receipt came back, my stomach twisted, not from the cost, but from the humiliation. The man who claimed to love my daughter had just tested both of us, and I feared he'd only begun. That night, lying awake in the quiet house, I stared at Marisol's photo on the nightstand. "He's not good for her," I whispered. "But how do I show her without losing her?" The waiter returned my card, and I signed the bill with a hand that shook slightly. $386. Nearly a week's wages, gone in the span of one meal. "There we are," Adrian said brightly, lifting his glass as if he just offered me a toast. "Nothing like a fine dinner to bring family together. Quite a step up from your usual dining experiences, isn't it, Mr. Vega?" Eliza's face blanched. She opened her mouth to protest, but I forced a smile, unwilling to let her dignity suffer more than mine already had. "Thank you for the evening," I said quietly. Adrian remained seated as I pushed back from the table, his posture relaxed, his eyes gleaming with smug triumph. "Eliza, darling, the photographer wants a few more shots before dessert," he added, guiding her away before she could speak to me further. His hand on her lower back was more claim than caress. I stood alone in the opulent dining room for a moment, chandeliers blazing overhead, strangers' conversations humming with practiced ease. I had never felt more like an intruder. The alcove near the entrance was dim, its frosted glass muting the Manhattan traffic outside. Eliza sat across from me, twisting her napkin in her lap, her diamond ring scattering fractured light across the tabletop. "Sweetheart," I said softly, still steadying my breath, "you need to think about how he treated us tonight." "Dad," she whispered, her voice fragile. "Maybe he was just nervous. First impressions are hard. He wanted it to go well." "Was that nervousness?" I asked. "Sliding the bill across to me? Talking down to where you grew up? Dismissing my work like it was a joke?" Her eyes darted away, unable to meet mine. "He's from a different world, Dad. Different customs." I leaned forward. "Eliza, a man who loves you wouldn't humiliate your father for sport. He wouldn't mock the neighborhood that raised you. That wasn't nerves. That was a test." Her hands trembled as she finally lifted her gaze. For a flicker, I saw my little girl again, the one who used to crawl into my lap when thunder scared her. Tears gathered in her eyes. "What if you're right?" she whispered. "What if I've made a mistake?" I reached across, covering her hands with mine. "Then you figure out the next step. And you remember you're not alone. You have people who love you for exactly who you are." She nodded slowly, dabbing her cheeks with the napkin, her shoulders heavy. Through the glass behind her, the world moved on, horns, footsteps, neon lights, indifferent to the small heartbreak unfolding in our corner. "Don't ever think believing in the good in people is weakness," I added. "That's your strength. But you deserve someone who honors it, not someone who exploits it." She breathed out, shaky but calmer, then rose. "We should get back. He'll wonder what's taking so long." "Let him wonder," I said, my voice firm. She squeezed my arm before stepping back into the bright noise of the dining room. The taxi ride home was a blur of headlights and memory. Houston's skyline shrank in the rearview as we crossed the bridge back toward the east side. My reflection in the fogged window merged with Marisol's face in the old photo tucked inside my wallet. "What would you have said to her?" I whispered, my breath clouding the glass. "How do I protect her without losing her?" Maria had never tolerated bullies. When Eliza was a child and a boy at school teased her, Marisol hadn't shouted or threatened. She'd simply knelt to the boy's level, looked him in the eye, and told him what respect meant. The boy had apologized on the spot, red-faced and stammering. I closed my fist around the chain at my chest. I'd promised her the day she died, take care of our girl. Keep her safe. 6 weeks passed. 6 weeks of strained conversations and little changes in Eliza's voice. She asked questions about respect, about love, about the difference between support and control. And with each question, Adrian grew more agitated. One quiet evening, the growl of an expensive engine shattered the stillness of my block. I rose from my chair just as a knock, no, a pounding, shook my front door. Adrian Clay stormed into my living room without invitation. His tailored coat flared behind him like a cape, his polished shoes striking the floor with fury. "We need to talk," he snapped. "About what?" I asked evenly, closing the door behind him. "Don't play dumb with me. Eliza's been asking questions, doubts she didn't have before. I know you've been poisoning her mind." "Poisoning?" I repeated, my voice level. "I told her only what I observed." His jaw clenched. "Here's what you're going to do. Tomorrow you'll call her. You'll apologize. Tell her you were wrong about me. That you overreacted. Do it, or you'll find out what it's like to lose her for good." I stood silently, my arms relaxed at my sides. Something in my stillness made him hesitate. His bravado faltered, just for a second. "You don't understand," he hissed, his face reddening. "I've worked too hard to get where I am. I won't let some old grease monkey ruin it." I gestured to the photos on my mantel, Eliza's graduations, her first apartment, birthday candles. "This is what I built. A daughter who knows she's loved unconditionally." "What exactly have you built, Adrian?" His lips curled. "The world doesn't run on bedtime stories, old man. It runs on power and money. Maybe your world does," I said, my voice quiet. "But hers doesn't." For a moment, his fists clenched as if he might strike me. Then, perhaps sensing something in my stance, he turned abruptly toward the door. "This isn't over," he muttered. The roar of his car faded into the night, leaving me alone with the hum of Mrs. Ramirez's TV next door, the bark of a neighbor's dog, the ordinary sounds of ordinary people. Nothing about this felt ordinary anymore. The next afternoon, I stood outside Eliza's apartment tower, a small bouquet of lilies, her mother's favorite, clutched in my hand. The doorman waved me through with recognition. She opened the door before I could knock. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, her usual bright smile dimmed. "Dad," she said softly, stepping aside. "These are for you." I offered the flowers, watching her features soften. "And I wanted to talk." Inside, her place gleamed with designer furniture, but it felt cold compared to our old home. She set the flowers in a vase, then returned with 2 mugs of coffee. She tucked her legs beneath her on the sofa like she had when she was small. For a moment, I saw my little girl again. "Eliza," I began, "whatever happens between you and Adrian, I love you completely. Your happiness is what matters." She nodded, wary. "But I need you to know, he came to my house last night. Angry. He demanded I call you to apologize for doubting him. And when I refused, he made threats. About cutting me off from you." Her mug trembled in her hands. He what? I covered her hands with mine. Sweetheart, I'm worried. That's not love. That's possession. Tears welled in her eyes. She whispered, What should I do? You'll know, princess, I said. And whatever choice you make, I'll be here. Our door is always open. We sat in silence as afternoon light streamed through her window, coffee cooling on the table between us, father and daughter bound by love and an unspoken understanding that everything had changed. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe to my channel, Dear Karma, so you never miss the next story. The June sun filtered through flowering trees, casting broken light across the white chairs and linen tables of the reception. I stood on the edge of the lawn, tugging at the collar of my navy suit. It was the same suit I'd worn at Eliza's graduation, and I felt its wear now among the sheen of designer dresses and hand-tailored jackets. The ceremony had been beautiful. Eliza glowed in Marisol's altered gown, the lace her mother had chosen years ago reshaped to honor past and present. My chest ached with pride even as unease coiled inside me. Excuse me, sir. A young man with a camera appeared at my elbow. Could you step aside for a moment? We're trying to capture family shots. I nodded and moved back, watching Adrian pose with his groomsmen, his smile cutting sharp as glass when he spotted me retreating. His domain now. His rules. Every gesture made it clear. I was here by sufferance, tolerated but not welcomed. Dad! Eliza rushed toward me, radiant despite the tension I read in her eyes. Come meet Adrian's college friends. But before I could step forward, Adrian intercepted her with practiced smoothness. Sweetheart, the photographer needs you again. Your father can mingle later. She hesitated, torn, but his hand on her waist steered her away before she could protest. Left standing among strangers, I wandered to the reception tables, scanning for my name. Table 14. Far from the wedding party, tucked between my Aunt Lucia and a couple I didn't know. The message was clear, family, but distant. You must be Eliza's father. A woman in pearls extended her manicured hand. Caroline. I work with Adrian. He's told us so much about you. The way she said it made my stomach tighten. All good things, I hope. Her laugh chimed brittle. Oh, you know Adrian. So clever with his observations about people. I managed a thin smile, settling into my seat. Aunt Lucia squeezed my hand, offering the warmth of a relative who remembered the real roots of our family. The couple beside me, the Hendersons, had known Eliza since childhood. For a brief moment, surrounded by people who mattered, I exhaled. That's when Adrian approached, the predator's smile fixed in place. Mr. Vega, are you enjoying yourself? Everything up to your standards? The table fell silent, sensing the barbs tucked inside his words. It's beautiful, I said evenly. You and Eliza have done well. Well, she had particular ideas about elegance, Adrian replied, glancing around at the lavish scene. I think we achieved something sophisticated. Quite different from what you're used to, I imagine. Aunt Lucia's napkin crumpled in her lap. The Hendersons exchanged uneasy looks. Different can be good, I said calmly. Absolutely. Variety is the spice of life. He circled behind me, voice carrying for the table to hear. I was just telling my colleagues how fascinating it is to see such diverse backgrounds represented here. Truly enlightening. I placed a hand on the chair behind me, beginning to lower myself. That's when I felt the sudden tug. The chair jerked back. My body followed gravity's call, slamming to the polished stone floor. The impact drove the air from my lungs. My suit tore at the seam of the shoulder. For a moment, the reception froze. Oops, Adrian said lightly, his voice slicing through the silence. Looks like someone's a little unsteady. Age catches up to us all eventually. His eyes gleamed with victory. He leaned forward slightly, just enough for those nearest to hear the venom behind his words. Maybe you're more comfortable on the ground. Your place is on the floor. Gasps rippled through the guests. Aunt Lucia half rose, horror etched into her lined face. The Hendersons looked on in stunned disbelief. Across the garden, Eliza's bouquet tumbled from her hands as she cried out, Dad! She rushed toward me, lace and satin sweeping against the grass. I lay there for a beat, tasting humiliation like copper in my mouth. The June sunlight dappled cheerful patterns across the tablecloths, indifferent to the cruelty unraveling beneath. The rustle of expensive fabric behind me drew my attention. A distinguished couple entered through the archway, still carrying the air of hasty travel. The man's posture, straight-backed, commanded attention even in civilian clothes. He scanned the scene with eyes that had once been trained to notice everything. "Saul," a woman at his side murmured. "We're late." But Saul Clay had stopped moving. His gaze locked on me, on the man struggling to rise with his daughter's help. His jaw slackened, disbelief chasing across his face. "Sir?" he whispered. I straightened my tie, ignoring the tear in my jacket. That voice. I'd know it anywhere. "Saul," I said, my own voice low, stunned. "Major Clay." He stepped forward with boots he wasn't wearing, every stride carrying the echo of years drilled into his bones. His eyes shone wet as he gripped my shoulder. "It can't be. Luis Vega? Sergeant Vega?" Around us, the murmur swelled. Guests leaned closer, confusion threading the air. Saul's voice rose, his tone the same one I'd heard cut through gunfire 2 decades ago. "Ladies and gentlemen, forgive me. But you need to know who this man is." Conversation halted. Even the quartet set down their bows. "This man is Sergeant Luis Vega, United States Army. April 2004, Fallujah. Our unit was overrun during a night patrol. I was pinned under fire, bleeding out. Luis carried me 300 yards through enemy fire to the evac point. Saved my life when any sane man would have sought cover." Nancy Clay's hand rose to her mouth, tears streaming as she looked between us. She'd heard the story before, but never expected to meet the man her husband had spoken of with reverence. Gasps spread through the crowd. Heads swiveled. The mechanic from the east side wasn't just someone's father. He was a soldier who'd dragged a major through gunfire. "I recommended him for the Silver Star," Saul said, his voice thick with gratitude. "Because of him, I came home. Because of him, I walked my son down this very aisle today." The reception held its breath. Adrian's smirk had vanished, replaced with pallor. His lips parted, but no words came. Beside me, Eliza gripped my hand, her eyes shining with tears of fierce pride. "Welcome home, Sergeant," Saul said, snapping to attention, his civilian clothes unable to mask the soldier still in him. The garden was silent, straining at the weight of the revelation. And for the first time since Marisol's funeral, I felt the invisible hand of her presence, steady, strong, reminding me that I had never stopped being more than what Adrian Clay saw. The reception air seemed to tremble with silence, every guest holding their breath. Even the string quartet stood frozen, bows suspended, eyes fixed on Saul Clay and the man he had just called a hero. "This man carried me through hellfire," Saul continued, his hand still gripping my shoulder. "Without him, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have lived to see my son grow up. I wouldn't have walked him down this aisle." Gasps rippled across the rows of tables. A woman dabbed her eyes with her napkin. Even the waitstaff stood rooted in place, trays forgotten in their hands. Adrian stood motionless a few feet away, pale as porcelain. His eyes darted from me to his father, his smirk long gone, replaced by confusion that bled into horror. Eliza clung to my arm, tears running freely down her cheeks. "Dad, why didn't you ever tell me?" she whispered. I shook my head. "I just did my job," I said softly. "Any soldier would have done the same." "No, Sergeant," Saul's voice cracked with emotion. "Not any soldier. You saved me. You gave me back to my family. And today, you gave me the chance to be here for my son." His gaze swung to Adrian. The disappointment in his eyes was sharper than any blade. "And I just witnessed you treat this man with disrespect, this man who gave me my life." The weight of Saul's words pressed down on the garden like a storm. Guests turned toward Adrian, whispers slicing the silence. "He pulled the chair. Mocked him. Humiliated him." Adrian's throat bobbed. For a long moment, he seemed paralyzed. Then, slowly, he stepped toward the microphone the band had been using for announcements. His hands shook as he adjusted it. The scrape of the stand echoed far too loud in the still air. His voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again, louder this time. I need to address everyone here. A hush spread across the crowd. Adrian swallowed, gripping the microphone like it was the only thing holding him upright. What I did tonight, what I've done for months, is inexcusable. I mocked this man. He gestured toward me. I mocked his work, his home, his values. I forced him to pay for an expensive dinner just to watch him struggle. And tonight, his voice faltered, breaking as shame flooded his features. Tonight I pulled his chair away and told him his place was on the floor. A collective gasp surged through the reception. Several guests shook their heads, their disgust palpable. Aunt Lucia covered her mouth, her shoulders trembling. And why? Adrian's voice grew raw, stripped of its polish. Because I was afraid. Afraid I'd never measure up to my father's service. Afraid Eliza would see that I wasn't half the man her dad is. Afraid of being ordinary. He turned to me, abandoning the microphone, his words spilling into the air. Mr. Vega, Sergeant Vega, I am ashamed. You saved my father's life, and I repaid that debt by humiliating you. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I'm asking, please, give me the chance to earn it. The microphone squealed in the silence he left behind. Guests watched, stunned, as the predator I had seen weeks before dissolved into something else entirely. A young man stripped bare, trembling in front of the very people he'd once sought to impress. Eliza clutched my arm tighter. Tears blurred her vision, but her voice was steady. Dad, what do we do? I felt the weight of Marisol's ring warm against my chest, the promise I'd made to keep our daughter safe. Sometimes protection didn't mean fighting battles for her. Sometimes it meant teaching others how to love her right. I stepped forward. Adrian flinched, but I kept my voice calm and firm. Son, it takes courage to admit mistakes in private. It takes more to admit them in public. What matters now isn't what you did. It's what you choose from here. Relief flooded his features as I extended my hand. His grip trembled as he took it, and then I pulled him into an embrace. The applause started as a ripple, hesitant, then swelled into a wave across the garden. Family, I whispered in his ear, means we carry each other, not drag each other down. You want to be part of ours? Prove it, every day, with how you treat her. He nodded against my shoulder, broken but resolute. Saul approached, pride and pain mingling in his eyes. That's the man I knew was in you, he said to his son. Nancy Clay's tears fell freely as she wrapped her arms around Eliza, then me, whispering apologies for what had unfolded. The photographer, who had stood frozen for so long, finally raised his camera. Should I? Yes, Eliza said firmly, her voice carrying. Capture this. This is where our family really begins. The shutter clicked, immortalizing a moment born of pain but tempered by truth. Later, as the band struck up again and couples moved to the dance floor, I stood on the garden's edge. The flowering trees swayed in the evening breeze, blossoms scattering like confetti on the grass. My chest rose and fell with a long, steady breath. I felt Marisol's presence beside me. Not as memory, but as if she were there, watching her daughter choose love with new eyes, watching me keep my promise. I touched the chain under my shirt, the ring warm against my skin. Eliza laughed then, bright and free, her hand intertwined with Adrian's. For the first time, his gaze on her wasn't possession or performance, it was gratitude. A man humbled, a man beginning again. And for the first time in months, the tightness in my chest eased. If you've been following this story, don't forget to subscribe to my channel Dear Karma. There are more stories like this one, and I don't want you to miss. The applause eventually faded, replaced by the cautious hum of conversation. Guests returned to their meals and wine, though the energy of the reception had shifted permanently. Where before there had been quiet superiority, now there was an undercurrent of respect, eyes glancing toward me not with pity, but with something heavier, something earned. Adrian remained at Eliza's side, quieter than I had ever seen him. His hand brushed hers not with ownership, but with the tentative touch of a man trying to prove he was worthy to hold it. I stepped back, allowing them space, though my eyes never left my daughter. Her laughter carried again across the lawn, bright but fragile, as if testing itself after a storm. Later, when the music swelled and couples took to the dance floor, Adrian approached me. His tie had loosened, his polished mask gone. "Mr. Vega," he said quietly, "I know words aren't enough. I'll show you. However long it takes, I'll show you." I studied him for a long moment. The arrogance was gone, replaced by raw humility. But humility is a seed, it grows only if tended. I gave a small nod. "Then start with her," I said. "Not me. Earn her trust back day by day. If you do that, you won't need to convince anyone else." He swallowed hard and nodded, his jaw tightening with resolve. As the evening waned, Saul found me standing near the archway where he and Nancy had first entered. His hand landed heavy on my shoulder, the weight of a soldier's gratitude behind it. "Louise," he said, his voice thick, "I owe you more than I can ever repay." "You don't owe me anything," I replied. "We were brothers in arms. We looked out for each other. That's all." "No," Saul said firmly. "You saved me. And tonight you saved my son in a different way. I've watched him lose himself in ambition these last years. I've seen arrogance eat away at him. But you—" his voice broke, and he cleared his throat. "You reminded him what honor looks like. What manhood really means." We stood together in silence, the sounds of the reception fading into the background. Two soldiers, older now, carrying memories that never fully let go. "Take care of him," I said quietly. "Not just for Eliza's sake, but for yours. He's still young. He can change." "I will," Saul promised. His eyes glistened, his jaw set with the determination of a man who had commanded men through chaos and loss. That night, when the reception ended and the last guests drifted away, I walked alone beneath the flowering trees of eternal gardens. The moonlight filtered through petals scattered across the ground, each one like a fragment of memory. Marisol's face came to me, not in sharp images but in the warmth of a presence I had carried for 18 years. "You kept your promise," I imagined her saying. "You protected our girl." The chain against my chest felt heavier than usual, as though the ring carried her approval. In the weeks that followed, I watched carefully. Adrian visited our neighborhood, places he once mocked as authentically working class. He shook hands with Mr. Ramirez, bought tamales from the corner stand, asked after the Johnson's dog. At first, his efforts seemed staged, but Eliza's steady gaze held him to account. If she sensed any pretense, her silence told him. And so he tried harder, not with grand gestures but with the humility of small acts. One evening, he appeared in my garage as I worked on the old Chevy. He wore no suit, no Rolex, just rolled-up sleeves and uncertainty in his eyes. "Teach me," he said simply. I handed him a wrench. His hands were soft, and used to the grit of grease, but he didn't flinch. He struggled, swore under his breath, laughed awkwardly when I teased him, and kept trying. Hours passed, the hum of crickets filling the silence between our words. By the time we closed the hood, he was covered in oil, but he wore it like a badge instead of a stain. "I never understood," he admitted, wiping his forehead. "But this, it feels real. I see why you love it." I nodded, hiding the small smile tugging at my lips. "It's not about the car, Adrian. It's about fixing what's broken. About not giving up just because it takes work." He looked at me then, and for the first time I believed he might actually understand. Eliza, for her part, grew sharper. She no longer accepted smooth words without action. When Adrian made a promise, she expected proof. When he stumbled, she confronted him with honesty, no longer shielding him with excuses. One afternoon, she sat at my kitchen table, sipping coffee from her favorite chipped mug. "Dad," she said, "I think he's changing. Not because I asked him to, but because he knows he has to, for himself." I studied her face, so much like her mother's. Strong, luminous, hopeful. "And what do you believe?" I asked. She smiled softly. "I believe people can grow, if they're willing to. And I believe Mom would want me to try." Her words pierced me, both wound and balm. I reached across the table, covering her hand. "Your mother would be proud of you. No matter what happens." One evening, weeks later, Adrian approached me outside the house. He looked nervous, younger somehow without the armor of his arrogance. "Mr. Vega," he began, "I know I'll never erase what I did. But I'm not the same man who pulled that chair. I don't expect you to trust me completely. Not yet. But I'll keep showing up. For Eliza. For this family. For as long as it takes." The street lamps cast long shadows across the quiet block. Children's laughter echoed faintly from a nearby yard. The simple music of an ordinary neighborhood. I studied him, weighing his words against his actions, his pride against his humility. And though my guard remained, I gave a small nod. "Keep proving it," I said. "One day at a time." His shoulders eased, not in triumph but in relief. That night, I stood by my bedroom window, watching the lights of Houston shimmer in the distance. The world outside pulsed with ambition, with power, with men like Adrian once had been. But here, in the small house where love had raised a daughter, where memory lived in every corner, I felt something else, peace. I touched the chain at my chest, the ring warm against my skin. "She's safe, Marisol," I whispered into the night. "For now, she's safe." Months passed. Summer heat gave way to the crisp bite of autumn, and with it came small changes that carried weight. Adrian no longer arrived in tailored suits to impress. More often than not, he showed up in rolled sleeves, hair tousled from work, hands carrying groceries or tools instead of polished business cards. He asked questions instead of giving orders. He listened. He stumbled often, but he kept standing back up. Eliza's laughter became freer, less brittle, no longer tempered by worry or defense. I watched her eyes as she looked at him now, not with blind infatuation but with clear-eyed assessment. She demanded respect, and more importantly, he gave it. One Saturday, I found them in the backyard. Adrian was crouched beside Eliza as she planted Marisol's favorite lilies along the fence. Dirt streaked his face, sweat glistened on his brow, but he smiled as though the work steadied him. When he caught me watching from the porch, he rose, brushing soil from his knees. "Mr. Vega," he said, his voice quiet but steady, "I want to thank you for not giving up on me when I deserved it. For teaching me that family isn't about wealth or power, it's about showing up. Every day." I studied him, searching for pretense. There was none. Only the raw honesty of a man still learning, but willing. "You're not thanking me," I said finally. "You're thanking her. She's the one who believed you could be more. Don't let her down." His eyes flickered to Eliza, who knelt among the flowers, her hands stained with soil and hope. He nodded. "I won't." The holidays arrived, and with them the warmth of community. Our small house filled with the scent of cinnamon and roasted meat, laughter spilling through the windows. Neighbors gathered, friends stopped by, children raced through the hallways. At the center of it all sat Eliza, radiant, her hand entwined with Adrian's. He moved differently now, no longer the man who sought to dominate a room, but one who sought to belong in it. Even Saul and Nancy joined us, bringing stories from years past and memories of service that bound us in a way only those who had lived through it could understand. Saul clasped my shoulder as the evening wound down. "You gave me my life twice, Luis," he said, his voice heavy with meaning. "Once in Iraq and once here. My son, he's finally becoming the man I prayed he would be." I looked toward Adrian, who was helping Eliza stack plates, laughing softly at something she whispered. The arrogance was gone. In its place was humility, fragile, but real. "He's still got a long road," I said. Saul nodded. "We all do." Later that night, when the guests had gone and the house was quiet, I sat in the living room. The glow from the Christmas lights reflected in the window, blending with the faint shimmer of stars outside. I touched the chain beneath my shirt, the ring pressing warm against my chest. "She's stronger than we ever dreamed, Marisol," I whispered. "And maybe he'll be strong enough for her too." A memory drifted back. Marisol's laugh in the kitchen, flour dusting her cheek, Eliza spinning in circles with ribbons in her hair. We had built a life from small things, simple things, real things. And though the years had taken Marisol, they had left me with the promise we made together: protect our daughter. Tonight, I realized protecting her didn't always mean shielding her from pain. Sometimes it meant letting her face it, learn from it, and grow stronger. Spring returned. The lilies Eliza and Adrian planted bloomed along the fence line, their white petals swaying in the breeze. I stood at the edge of the yard, coffee in hand, watching them bend but never break under the wind. Eliza joined me, slipping her arm through mine. "They're beautiful, aren't they?" she said. "They are," I agreed. She leaned her head against my shoulder. "Dad, I know things didn't start the way they should have. But I think Adrian's becoming the man I hoped he could be." I kissed her forehead, the same way I had since she was a child. "That's because you're not afraid to demand the love you deserve." She smiled, her eyes glistening. "I learned from the best." My throat tightened, but I said nothing. Words weren't needed. That evening, Adrian approached me once more. His hands were stained from helping fix the Chevy's engine, his shirt damp with sweat. "Mr. Vega," he said, his tone careful but sure. "I know I can't erase what I did. But I promise, I'll never make you, or Eliza, feel small again. I'll spend the rest of my life proving that." I looked at him, measuring the truth in his eyes. Then I nodded, extending my hand. He gripped it firmly, no longer limp, no longer dismissive. "Then don't say it," I told him. "Live it." The sun dipped low, painting the horizon in gold and crimson. The neighborhood settled into its evening rhythm: children's laughter, dogs barking, the hum of televisions behind open windows. Normal sounds from normal lives. The kind of life I had fought to give my daughter. And as I stood there, watching Eliza laugh with Adrian in the fading light, I felt the ache in my chest ease at last. She was safe. She was loved. And though the future would always hold challenges, tonight I knew we had turned a corner. The ring against my chest was warm, almost alive. "She's going to be okay, Marisol," I whispered into the dusk. "We kept our promise." If you were moved by this story, don't forget to subscribe to my channel Dear Karma. Share your thoughts in the comments, and stay with us for more stories that will touch your heart.